Morning, everyone. Welcome to the September Friday Forum. My name is Linda Hall. I'm here with Barb Tobias. We are on the Board of Directors for Connect to Community. For those of you who aren't familiar with CTC, we are a parent-founded, parent-led organization serving young adults with developmental disabilities here in the Northwest suburban area. We offer these Friday forums as part of a larger educational outreach initiative that also includes informational tours, which we're happy to say are going to be starting up again at the end of this month, so watch for those, and an annual transition summit that will be held in the spring. So for today's seminar, we want to let everyone know that we're going to ask everyone to remain on mute. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, which you can find the link for that at the bottom of your screen. And we will field as many of those questions as we can at the end. We want to say that CTC is very involved in wanting young adults, particularly those who are preparing for transition out of school, to live a full and meaningful life in the community. So today's topic is really relevant because we all know that full inclusion in the community is often predicated on the ability to access transportation. So we're very happy to have this topic presented today. We're going to lead off with Ed Madden from Pace Suburban Bus. He's the coordinator of public outreach. And then we will follow up after Ed's presentation with a couple of representatives from our area townships, Mel Maldonado from Schaumburg Township and Carrie Nordine from Palatine Township, just to talk about the services that they offer for their residents, which are similar in part to what other townships offer here in our suburban area. So thank you, Ed, for being here. I'm going to kick it off to you. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you. I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I do this correctly. And hopefully everyone sees Pace Suburban Bus front and center. So what I'm going to do today is really just kind of give everyone an overview of kind of everything Pace. So this is going to be just predominantly about ADA paratransit. However, I want to start out with some of the other services and innovative options that we're providing for riders of all ability levels. And with the hope in mind that some of the alternative options might be at some point in the future, something that might be useful for many of us in the room today. And so I just want to start out by giving a little bit of history about Pace. I want to go through our different services. And then, of course, the crux of the conversation will be about ADA paratransit, and then address some of the questions and concerns that any of you may have regarding that service. So starting out, I want to let people know, although we technically have only been around since 1983, meaning Pace, we've actually been around much, much longer than that with our legacy division. So our formal name is the Pace, the Suburban Bus Division of the Regional Transportation Authority. That's a very long thing to say, but that is our legal name. And we were created in the 1980s, early 80s, 1983. And to give you an idea of the history at that time, many of you may not kind of be aware it was kind of similar to how it is now in terms of some of the challenges that we have. But one of the things that was very similar was the high price of gas. This was the end of the Carter administration, the very beginning of the Reagan administration. There was some conflicts with Iran that was impacting the global oil supply, and gas prices were sky high. There were people literally where you could not get gas easily. It was expensive. It was certainly cheaper relative to today's costs. I mean, it was cheaper compared to today's cost, but it was relatively just as expensive based on costs at that time. And it was in very, very low supply. If you had a car with the license plates that ended in a odd number, you could only get gas on odd number days. And if you had ended in an even number, you can only get it on even number days. and there were lines around the block to get to gas stations. And it wasn't uncommon that people would wait in line, finally get up to a pump, and sure enough, now all the tanks were empty. And it was a very, very challenging time. And so, as you can imagine, the bus companies that existed at that time were similarly impacted by this. As a matter of fact, a lot of them were on the either had gone bankrupt or were on the verge of bankruptcy. So the Illinois legislature stepped in. They created the RTA, the Regional Transportation Authority. They literally took over control of those transit agencies and then unifying them into a single entity. Well, I shouldn't say single entity, under an umbrella entity of the RTA that consisted then of course, the CTA, which is the big service in the city of Chicago, Metro Trains, the commuter train service, and then created PACE bus division. And so we actually go back because we inherited a lot of legacy things. And so we go back to the streetcar days. And as you can see on the image on the upper left is of an old streetcar, and on the right was when we were transitioning from streetcars to actual buses. I hope those look very, very old to people, because they are. And then the division or the bus agencies that we took over, here's two examples of them. One is Nortran. I knew that because I grew up in the northwest suburbs or northwest side of Chicago, adjacent to the northwest suburbs. That's the image you see on the top half of this slide, and on the bottom half is the Westtown Bus Company that served the kind of the Melrose Park, Schiller Park, also West Suburban area. And I want to emphasize, when we were created, we're commonly known as PACE, and I didn't even understand what was behind our name. Actually, I thought it was an acronym where the P stood for something, the A stood for something, and it doesn't. It just means PACE. It's specifically a marketing name, but thank God, because again, as I mentioned, our legal name is the PACE, the Suburban Bus Division of the Regional Transportation Authority. And when I answer the phone, it's nice to just say, hello, PACE. But I want to give you just a kind of a summary overview of our services. Many people know us for our fixed route service. These are the buses that you see along the main routes throughout the suburban area. We do have some express buses, community service buses. These are dial-a-rides and our on-demand services. Of course, we'll be spending a good amount of time on ADA Paratransit. And then I want to also talk about some of our other options, our van pool and rideshare options, and our pulse lines as well. So as you can imagine, our main service area is the suburbs, right? We're the Suburban Bus Division of the Regional Transportation Authority. But surprisingly, this also includes the collar counties. So for many people, as you can see, I have an image of a rural area. And we really do cover everything. Oops, my slides must be timed here. But I remember on my first couple of days of work, I was traveling to do a presentation in Will County, and I was literally going through cornfields, and all of a sudden I saw a PACE bus whipping by me, and it just struck me as, wow, I guess we really are out here. And but in general, though, most of the areas, the suburban area that we know well, but we actually do cover, because we cover, Will County, Kane County, and some of the more rural areas. Now, in general, the further away you get from the city of Chicago, there's less service. The closer we are to the city, there's more service. But we also surprisingly serve the city of Chicago as well. And then you might be asking, well, why Chicago if there's the CTA, the Chicago Transit Authority? Well, many of our suburban routes connect with the CTA lines at nearby L stations. So for instance, in the Niles Park Ridge area, we have buses that run along Milwaukee Avenue that go to Jefferson Park, the Blue Line. On the south side of Chicago, our Orange Line goes to Midway Airport. And then on the south side, many of our bus lines connect with the 95th Street station at the Dan Ryan to connect with the Red Line. Additionally, we have our express services, one of which the I-55 bus on shoulder service runs from the Plainfield Joliet area. It rides on the shoulder of the I-55 Stevenson Expressway and goes to downtown Chicago, both the medical district and then the North Michigan Avenue area. And then we also have express services to popular destinations. These are to things like Soldier Field, Ravinia, and other ones that I'll talk about. And then, of course, ADA paratransit service. And we serve a large area, the whole 6-county region. So, of course, this includes Cook County, but also Lake, McHenry, Kane, DuPage, and Will. We literally go from the Wisconsin line to the Indiana line. And it's a sizable area, about the size of some of our smaller states. Additionally, our facilities are spread out throughout the area. Believe it or not, well, not believe it or not, our headquarters actually is in Arlington Heights. That's where I am today. And for those of you that, or for those people that are in our service area that live either in the South area, they might think of Arlington Heights as northern Wisconsin practically, but it is actually in the geographical center of our service area. But the crux of our service, our bus garages, our facilities are throughout the area. And it's typically in more, they're based in the major areas. So the larger towns and cities like Aurora, Joliet, Waukegan, of course, closer to Chicago, Evanston and Des Plaines, we have divisions. The River Division is out in Elgin. Then we have some on our south and southwest sides at Markham, South Hallam and Bridgeview. And then, of course, west and then even up north in McHenry County, there's a separate division there for the McRide service. Well, I'm missing a slide here, but I'm going to go into just kind of talk about, in general on our fixed route services. Again, these are our buses that run the same routes every day along the same paths. They typically go over larger areas. The cost for those are $2 if you use your Ventra card. It's $2.25 if you use cash. We actually discourage cash for a number of reasons. A, you pay a little bit more, and you need exact change. So if you need to get on one of our buses and you've got to get on it, it's very important. You have an important interview or an appointment and all you have is a roll of $100 bills on you. Guess what? That ride's going to cost you $100. But I know that's an exaggeration, but our drivers they cannot provide any change. So if all you have is even a $5 or $10 or $20 bill, do you ever want to overpay? So we'll talk more about the Ventra. I do also want to touch upon our reduced fares. There's a couple of options. I'll explain those in more detail, but they're roughly half price. So it's for those using Ventra, it's only $1. If you're using cash, it's $1.10. Additionally, sometimes it may take more than one bus to get where you're going. So you may have to transfer to a second bus. That's where you wait, you take one bus a certain part of the way, then you get off and wait for a second bus and get on that. If you use your Ventra card, it's an additional 30 cents. If you have a reduced fare card, it's 20 cents. But I want to point out, if you are paying cash, and you're free to do that, but every time you get on a new vehicle, you have to pay that full fare again. And for some people, you may even need a third vehicle. It's not as common, but some people do. They have to then pay each time they get on a bus. So you really save money using the Ventra card. We do have some areas like in Waukegan, Joliet, Aurora, that it's actually a free transfer. And I should point out too, if you do use a third vehicle or a second transfer, even on our regular buses anywhere in the system, that third ride is free as long as you're within a 2-hour window of when you started your first bus trip. Additionally, we have some fares for people who typically may use both PACE and CTA. So these are our combined passes. I put this in just for those that do use that. CTA recently reduced their passes significantly, so this may be something that's of interest. We also have some combined passes with CTA, our 7-day and monthly passes, and these were reduced as well. And for all of them, there is a reduced fare. It's roughly half of what the regular fare is. Our PACE passes, those fares have really remained unchanged except for the 7-day and 30-day, and our premium passes, those have, I'm sorry, the 7-day pass was reduced, but our 30-day was not, nor the premium 30-day. Some miscellaneous fares we have. I'm going to talk about our dial-a-rides. Those fares are determined by the sponsor of that service. On demand, these are like dial-a-ride services, but actually operated directly by PACE. They're the same as our fixed route buses. Then ADA Paratransit is $3.25, and that's a flat charge, even if somebody has a reduced fare card. Then we have some premium services. These are a little bit more expensive. Those are $4.50, but they're typically going to areas where parking is ridiculous. $20, $30, $40, $50 parking fees. So even though these are more than our regular ones, they still are a very good bargain. In our fare card system, I did touch upon using the Venture card. Here's 2 examples of them. One is the physical card. You'll see that on the left, just like any other credit or debit card or any other contactless payment card. And then on the right, that's an image of an iPhone, because we also have a Venture app that you're able to use. And this is probably more, well, for those of us that are, for those of you that are tech savvy, this is really a good option because you can use your phone, you can use your smartwatch, anything that you can utilize an app, you can use that for making a payment as well. This is important too if you're using Metro, because the Venture fare card, I should point out, is not only for PACE buses. You can use this on CTA buses and L trains, and also Metro commuter trains. However, on Metro, it's a little bit different. You know, normally when you get on a bus, you tap your card at the very front. There's a reader when you get on, right near the cash box, right by the driver. But on Metro trains, commuter trains, it's different. There's a conductor who comes around. Once you've gotten on the train and sat down, eventually they'll come around to collect your ticket. And so you can still get tickets, you know, at the train station itself. There's a little office or an agent inside. They're not always open, but they often are. But you're able to also use the Venture app to buy an e-ticket, which allows you, even if you didn't, you know, plan really well before and you're on the train and now you see the conductor starting to come around to collect the cards, you can quickly open up the app and purchase that e-ticket. And then there's a way to show it to the conductor and validate it so that people can't game the system with taking images of tickets, for instance. So here's some examples of our reduced cards. On the very top, you'll see an Venture card. It has an orange banner at the top. That's the Ride Free card. That's available to anybody whose household who is eligible for a reduced fare card, but that their household income is under a certain dollar amount. The reduced fare card, I should point out, that is typically for seniors over the age of 65 or anyone with a qualifying disability. Additionally, the next card to the right of that, the one with the green strip, and that's the ADA Paratransit card. I do want to point out that also acts as a Venture card. The one side of it's the ID, the flip side of it is actually the Venture card. So even if you have an ADA Paratransit trip and you're let's say maybe utilizing either our fixed route buses or CTAs and or the trains, because I do want to point out all of those vehicles are 100% accessible for those that are able to get to that service. And then the far right is the regular reduced fare. Actually, I misspoke. That blue one, the second one on the right, that's actually the student fare. So for anyone that is in actually elementary school, but usually it's high school students, college students, that we do have a student fare card. And then for anybody who is either a student who happens to have a qualifying disability, or anyone that has a qualifying disability, there's the purple one, the reduced fare card you see on the front right. And I believe most everyone here is probably now out of high school, but just for those that are, just so that you're aware, if you have any other family members who are still in high school, they are eligible to get the reduced fare card. You can get that on Ventra's website. Some schools that have a high number of students that take either PACE or CTA to them will have those available in their student services in their offices. But most of the suburban schools, you can get those through Ventra's website. If you have a qualifying disability, though, you're actually better off with the reduced fare card, even though you could get the student card, because the student card is only available on school days, where the reduced fare card is available at any time any of ours, PACE or CTA vehicles are running. Also, I want to point out the RTA, they manage this. The RTA is our parent organization. They're in charge of us, CTA and Metra, but they just introduced a new online portal for anyone that has a ride-free or reduced or needs a ride-free or reduced card. You can apply or renew online before you had to mail it in. And then if anyone lost or their card was stolen, either reduced fare or ride-free, or the ADA Paratransit card, you can go to the online portal and be able to get a replacement card. Now, the ADA Paratransit, you cannot apply for it because I'll talk more about that, because there actually is a pretty thorough registration for that card. We'll talk about more of that in a bit. So I'm going to skip this. This is the slide that should have been earlier when I was talking about fixed route buses. I'll correct that later. But I do want to talk about, and this is relative to our fixed route buses. I did touch upon our bus on shoulder for those trips going from the Plainfield Joliet area to downtown Chicago to the medical district. And that was our first service that started in 2011. It was actually kind of controversial at the time of having a bus riding on the shoulder. And the whole purpose of that, though, is so that when traffic is backed up, and if you've ever been on the Stevenson Expressway, that is often backed up, much like our Kennedy Expressway is, or the Edens can be. At many times, it seems like it's that way almost all the time, except for late at night or on weekends. But this was an innovative option that allowed our buses to go on the shoulder whenever traffic is backed up. So it really reduced and kind of created a more like a train service, a train-like service, but utilizing regular buses and the infrastructure of the expressways. But we now have a similar thing on I-90, the Jane Addams Expressway. So if anyone has ever gone out that way, you may see at times. Now, if traffic is moving smoothly, you won't see it. But if it's ever backed up, there will be special lights on those overhead gantries that will show that PACE is allowed to use that shoulder. So that allows us express service from roughly the Elgin, Schaumburg to Rosemont area. And then we're also allowed to use the shoulders on the Edens Expressway. And then very soon, there is, many of you may know, the Illinois Tollway is rebuilding the 294 section of the Tri-State Tollway from O'Hare to 95th Street by Bridgeview. And as a part of that, not only are they adding an additional travel lane for all vehicles, but they're also adding a dedicated bus lane for our buses that will be able to also bypass any stop traffic on it. And these buses are a little bit different than our regular ones. They're a little bit nicer, kicked up a notch. They do have free Wi-Fi. Actually, all of our buses do, but they also have USB charging ports, which is nice to charge your electronic devices or not having to use the battery on them. And they're more comfortable. They're more like an airplane where you actually have your individual light and fan, a cooling fan as well. So then also I touched upon we have express buses to popular destinations. Right now, most of these are temporarily suspended. And the main reason why is we don't have enough drivers for them. We are experiencing, as many people in the logistics and truck industries have a significant labor shortage. We do as well. So our drivers concentrate on our regular traditional routes. So these types of things kind of went a little bit by the wayside with two exceptions. Soldier Field, we have service that goes to all home Sunday games, and Ravinia Festival, and that is actually that's kind of a shuttle that operates by the local metro train stations to the venue. And the reason why we're able to provide that is because these are typically on evenings and weekends, and certainly Soldier Field is Sundays only, where these other services operate at times that competed with our other more pressing needs. I do want to touch upon our van pool service. So this is for people who live in the same area, kind of work in the same area, that they're able to carpool and share a vehicle, but we actually provide the vehicle for them. It's everything from a traditional minivan to a 15-passenger van. But this is a way for people to save money, avoid high driving costs. There is a cost to it, but it's based on the number of riders in it and the distance traveled, but it includes gas, tolls, insurance. It is significantly cheaper than most people's commuting costs when you factor in all of those expenses. So now I want to delve in a little bit more with our community transit. This is demand response, much like our ADA paratransit services, where somebody calls and then we come and pick you up. So this is typically almost done in advance. It almost always has to be at least a day before. And it's usually limited to eligible riders. There's two types, a dial-a-ride service and our on-demand service. And when I say eligible riders, this is typically, now there are some exceptions, but in general, it's typically for senior citizens or those with qualifying disabilities. So these are the smaller kind of transit vehicles that you see, almost like hotel shuttle buses, that you'll see more in the neighborhoods of the suburbs, and you might even our fixed route buses. Some of them, as I mentioned, are open to all riders, like our on-demand is, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So the dial-a-ride services, and just so that you know, at the end of this presentation, there will be two representatives from the Palatine dial-a-ride and also the Schaumburg dial-a-ride services. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, except to just say these are generally limited to small geographical areas, usually defined by whoever's sponsoring it. They're operated, these are PACE vehicles and PACE supported, but it's typically the sponsor that really controls it. So those are typically operated by counties, townships, municipalities. It's in cooperation with PACE, but the actual entity does kind of sets their own rules. They provide their own drivers, they pay for their gas, they pay for their insurance. We help with the maintenance of the vehicles, but a lot of those things are handled directly by those sponsors. They also determine what the fare is going to be. Some of them are free, not many, but some are free. Some are as low as $1. They're typically in the $2, $3, $4 range. Some of them can get up to $10, depending on how far they go. But those are all decided, kind of the devil's in the details here. We probably have about 50 different dollar rides in our service area, and they all operate by different rules. They have different boundaries. They can determine who can ride or who may be restricted from riding. Very, very similar to dial-a-ride services, one that we actually provide directly. This is PACE on Demand. It's similar to dial-a-rides. You do or are encouraged to make your reservation at least a day ahead. You can do it as soon as 1 hour before, but you know that's kind of cutting it a little bit close. As long as there's open seats, you'll be able to get a ride, but during those heavy commuting hours in the morning, or in the evening commute, sometimes you might find some issues. So I do recommend making your reservation at least the day before. Some of them do actually have scheduled stops. So they do stop at any of the major train stations in their service area, or, hospitals, or some of the malls. But in general, it's a thing where you call and they come and pick you up wherever you're at home or your office, or if you're out shopping, and then we'll take you to wherever you need to go. I like to say directly, but it's not always directly, because these are still shared rides. So that if I get on the bus, but then you get on the bus and someone else got on the bus, even though your stop, even though I got on before you, if your stop's before mine, we're going to stop at yours first. And it is limited to certain areas. For instance, we only have 10 of them right now. I think it's going to be a thing of the future. We're going to see more micro transit that services smaller areas instead of these buses that go along, very long routes along major streets. And the closest one, kind of where I believe many of us are, is the Arlington Heights Rolling Meadows ones. These typically, or at least historically, initially were created when they had to eliminate a bus route in a certain area where there was still some demand for public transit, but not enough to support a bus that operates several times throughout the day. And now I think it's transitioning to how things are changing, where people are perhaps living maybe in downtown Des Plaines or Arlington Heights or Palatine, and they may work in that area and then go to school in that same area and shop in that same area and have entertainment options in that same area. So they're not necessarily making commutes to downtown Chicago back and forth every day. So I think over time you're going to see more of these in your area. We also have an innovative program that just started called Van Go. This is where we provide a vehicle at high transit areas, like the pilot project is actually using train stations. So there's one in Lake Forest and then the Lake Cook one. So right now it's limited to that Lake County area, but this is where you could take a train, and when you get to the station, actually go to one of these vehicles. Of course, you have to register the day before, and they have a keypad on them. You just punch in the code that you're given. You get in the vehicle. There's a lock box that you're able to also use the keypad on, and there's a key, and you start that van and you drive to wherever you need to go, typically your office. The vehicle then stays there during the day, and then at the end of the day, you drive this back. So it's designed, initially the pilot project is typically for a single rider, but eventually we're looking to expand this to multiple riders, where it might be 7 or up to 15 passengers, where that demand is where there's enough people going to that same area. So typically that might be one of the corporate centers, around Milwaukee and in Lake Cook Road, for instance. There's a number of corporate centers there. So they might utilize that to get to the Lake Cook train station. All right. So now I really want to touch upon our ADA paratransit service, spend most of our time on this. So ADA paratransit service is actually mandated, it's law. It's mandated by the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. And this provides that any public transit that we provide for able-bodied riders, that we provide para or like transit for those that are unable to access that service. So it complements fixed route service. It's designed to I wouldn't necessarily say replace it, but it's designed to provide that similar service. So there are some limitations to it. So for instance, probably one of the biggest things is that any trips that are used on paratransit, they must originate and conclude within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route. So if somebody lives in an area where there isn't any fixed route service, unfortunately, there is no paratransit service. And this is by law. It's designed to provide what exists for an able-bodied rider. And if there isn't a service for an able-bodied rider, there isn't a service for those with disabilities. So this is a key factor in using that. Additionally, it must operate within the same time as a fixed route service. So we have a number of routes that predominantly run during the morning commute. They may be metro feeders where they go from a suburban area to the closest train station. And that's where the demand is. So that's where that service goes. And then during the midday or the afternoon, there's no demands for that service. So that route does not run during those hours. And then it starts running again for the afternoon commute. So it may start again at, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon and then run till 7 or 7:30. So if that's a service that somebody's within 3/4 of a mile of, that ADA paratransit is only available during those same times or dates, because a lot of our routes only operate on Monday through Friday. So we have a number of routes that do operate on Saturday and some that operate on Sunday. But if somebody needs to travel using ADA paratransit and it's on a Sunday and there's no Sunday service in that area, it's unfortunately just will not be available. So the devil's really in the detail here. I know sometimes it's hard when there's a family that's seen, for instance, the dial-a-ride services, and they're counting on that for their child. And then when they go in and apply for ADA paratransit, they might find that service is not near them. So it's for all practical purposes, just not an option for them. I wish it was different, but it is the federal rules that we have to operate by. So the service itself, this is very, very specific only to those with qualifying disabilities. So there actually is a pretty thorough screening process that the RTA does to make sure that people who are applying for ADA paratransit are the ones that truly need it. At one time, things were really, really loose with the rules and people were taking advantage of that. And it was, there were some people riding it that really shouldn't have been. And it was taking seats from those that really, really did need it. So they've gotten a lot stricter on that. But I do kind of want to, caution you too, these are also shared rides. And so, especially as a parent, you need to be cognizant of, you're still having a family member riding on a vehicle that is with other people. So, it's not like a medical transport that's going to come and pick up somebody just at one location and they're the sole rider and go to the end. Now, throughout COVID, we did have that, where for social distancing purposes and for safety, we literally had a rule that there was only one person or one rider per vehicle. Of course, there was a driver, but to make things as safe as possible. Now that things are getting, I don't want to say back to normal, but closer to normal, that's starting to transition now. And we still try to, where possible, because it's still there. We still have issues with COVID, but it's just not feasible, because now demand on the service is expanding as well. People are getting more comfortable with public transit. So it really is getting back to those shared rides. As I mentioned, the service times, again, it's only available the same time as fixed route service. This typically isn't an issue for anyone who may live in the city or live very close to the city where there is very, very regular service or a lot of it. So within the city of Chicago, there's pretty much a major street every 4 blocks, certainly every 8 blocks. And so typically, those services run a lot more often than many of ours do. Many of them run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And for those riders, they're relatively lucky, because then ADA paratransit is also available those same times. And so, but again, the farther you get away in the suburbs, the farther we typically are from a fixed route, and then less likely that service is available or an option. And as I mentioned, it's a very thorough process. One must be certified by the RTA. And this is it begins with the first phone call. So I'm going to pass out or provide a bunch of materials that will be emailed to you support materials to my presentation, but very specifically about ADA paratransit. And in it explains about the process that one must take. The one thing is that it begins with a phone call, and either the applicant or their assistant, somebody helping them, needs to call and at least get the process initiated. And the reason they do that is they want to pre-screen people to make sure, by asking them some basic questions, that will, let them know whether they have a very good chance of being certified for it. So if, let's say, somebody had surgery and they're just going to be rehabbing for a while, they're not going to be able to get ADA. They're not going to be able to get certified for ADA paratransit unless it's a longer recovery. And then they may get conditionally certified for just during that time. But typically we're talking about people who have of more permanent type of disabilities where, it's going to be very clear they're going to be eligible for it. So they ask these questions. They just don't want to put people through the process if they're not going to get determined in the end. And then it consists of an in-person interview as well. So let me talk about it. The application process. Somebody would call the paratransit number. It's here. Don't worry about this. It's going to be included with the information that it will get emailed to you. Once somebody calls, if they make it past those initial screening questions, then an application is mailed to their home. One thing that I suggest, because there will be instructions in with you, letting you know what you need to do. There's some documentation you'll need to get from your physician or your medical office. And once this is all complete, they'll ask you to then call and make your appointment. I recommend, as soon as you get the application, just call and make your appointment and tell them, yeah, I got all this stuff together, because it might be a while before you get that appointment. Now, during COVID, things were different. There was not any in-person interviews. They are just starting these back up again. During COVID, there were a number of people who were just screened with the information over the phone and what they submitted in. But now those riders are now ultimately going to have to go back and do the in-person interview if they didn't do that initial one. But certainly anyone applying now is going to do that. Once you make your appointment, an ADA vehicle will come and pick you up from your residence or wherever you're staying, and they will provide you. It's a good kind of a good first start to see if this is something you're comfortable with or you're comfortable with for your family member. And then once somebody goes through, eligibility is determined, and then the RTA has up to 21 days to make a determination, and then a letter sent out to the applicant. There's 2 centers. This slide says that they're closed, but I was just informed these are, if they haven't opened already, they will be shortly. And so, but nonetheless, the process is still the same. You call for an application, they'll screen, you submit the application in with any supporting document. And during COVID, the interview was done by phone, but now we're getting back to that. I'll have to change these slides. Everyone must recertify every 4 years. And as I mentioned, if somebody did not do the initial screening, they will have to do it again. I just want to kind of move something covering my slide here. So the RTA is now launching a pilot project. And then this is only for first-time applicants or anyone who's had a significant change in their disability. And let me just see. And forgive me, I'm having some brain fog here on this. Might actually might not be relevant now that things have reopened up again. My apologies for that. Please just ignore this slide and for my my memory loss. All right, so scheduling a trip. So now once somebody is has been certified and they're now able to use the trip, I do want to say that you make your reservations a day ahead. So you make reservations for your travel the following day. I recommend you do that as early in the day as possible. And the reason why is because if you wait too long late in the day, the trip that you may want to make, they may not have available seats with the available vehicles. We are running with some, again, with having to deal with some driver shortages. And so I just recommend that if you know you need to make a trip, reserve as early as possible. And it doesn't have to be the day before. You can do this several days ahead, or as soon as you know you have an appointment, I would call in and make that reservation. The line is open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. daily, and this includes holidays. When you schedule a trip, it's very, very important that if you have an appointment that you tell the reservationist of that, because you want to allow enough time for that trip. As I mentioned, these are still shared ride services. They are not as quick as just getting in a vehicle. It's like if somebody was giving you a ride to a doctor appointment, that might be, say, let's say it's a traditional in a car ride, it might be a 20-minute trip, but in a paratransit vehicle, it may take 45 minutes or sometimes even longer. So you want to make sure that if you have an appointment, that you're building in enough time, and don't worry what that is. The person making the reservation is basing on a number of factors, and they're able to advise you on that. But it's just important to let them know, hey, this is for an appointment. This is a very important appointment. I want to make sure that I don't miss that and that I'm not running late. And then if it is, say, a doctor appointment or any other thing that does run late, you want to make sure, of course, you make your return reservation ahead of time. So leave enough time. But if it is running late, there's a way for you to call in and alert the service. But we'll talk more about that. So if you make a trip and need to schedule, you need to reschedule or cancel it. You must call in and cancel it. We're trying to avoid no-shows in our service, where unfortunately, we have a high percentage of drivers that will go to pick up a person and they're not there. Now, there is some wiggle room. I mean, we know stuff happens sometimes. There might be some confusion. If somebody's at, say, a mall, for instance, exactly where at that mall they needed to be picked up. So there is some wiggle room in this, but we had some people who were blatantly just always canceling trips and never bothering to call. So they had to institute a thing to encourage people to do so. You want to make sure that you're not classified as a late canceled trip or a no-show, because if you get too many of those, it can impact your availability to make reservations. So you want to be very, very careful with that. Now, you can make same day trip changes, but I want to just caution you. It has to be there has to be at least a 2-hour notice, and it's only if they can make the accommodation. And sometimes they can, and sometimes they can't. So just know that if something happens that needs to be done, we'll do what we can to make that accommodation, but I wouldn't count on it. Unfortunately, a lot of people can be disappointed when they find out that there's just not an available seat. That's also part of the reason why at the very beginning, I did talk about some of the other services. So we do encourage people, if they can, to use fixed route service, if that's at all a possible option, or at times where it may be an option, because you don't have to deal with a lot of these caveats. ADA paratransit is wonderful when it works well for people, but a lot of times it doesn't work well for people because of these limitations. And fixed route services might just be an option. You don't have to make a reservation. You can make a last minute decision to travel. Again, I know that's dependent on being able to get to a bus stop or to a train station, but I just want to point that out. The ADA paratransit service is not perfect, and I'm sure many of you can tell me that better than I'm stating now. Also, it's important to know when you're picked up, the rider must be in sight of the vehicle while they're waiting. So you cannot be waiting inside a building until that, looking out, waiting to see if that driver comes up. The person must be within sight. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be outside, for instance, in the code, but you have to be somewhere where the driver can see you. And you need to be ready 5 minutes before your pickup time. If a driver pulls up, they will wait at least 5 minutes after arriving. Sometimes they might get there early. I know this doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So even if a driver gets there, say 15 minutes early, they must wait at least 5 minutes after that scheduled pickup time. So it's whatever is later, either the 5 minutes after arriving or the 5 minutes after the pickup time. So the driver is allowed a 20-minute window. Excuse me. So if your pickup time is scheduled for 12 noon, that vehicle is actually considered on time if it arrives by 12:20. Normally, we wouldn't think of that as on time, but for the purposes of ADA paratransit and the regulations, it actually is. That's important because there is a provision that if your vehicle is late excessively, that you are able to get sorry about that, that you are able to get sorry, hold on, I got distracted here. I'm sorry, I lost my thought. All right. Hold on. Can anyone tell me what I was just discussing?
You were talking about how the 20-minute window, that's acceptable. It's not late if it's within 20 minutes.
Okay. All right. All right. Let me move on. I don't immediately recall, but after that 5-minute period is over, the driver must contact the carrier. The carrier will try and call you. So it's important that you, if you can, have a cell phone with you, have it charged, have it ready. If there's still no rider, the driver will leave and it will be recorded as a no-show. And as I mentioned, paratransit is a shared ride, and the travel time is considered on time if it's comparable to taking fixed route service. So I mentioned the example of you get in the car and it might be 20 minutes to drive from your home, say to a doctor appointment. But the paratransit service, to be considered on time, it factors what it would take if you were taking regular, say, fixed route service. So that includes time, say, walking to the bus stop. That would include time waiting for a normal, regular waiting time for a bus. If that trip were to normally require transferring from one vehicle to a next, it would then consider that waiting time for that second vehicle. So just keep in mind, it includes that. And so even though it might take 20 minutes to drive from one place, it may take 45 minutes in a regular fixed route bus to get there. So if that paratransit trip also takes 45 minutes, that is considered the same travel time. Do want to point out our drivers are not medically trained. They can't carry packages for passengers. Now some will, but they're not supposed to. The driver cannot go beyond the front door of a residence. They will kind of come up and try and assist somebody if they can to get on the vehicle. They cannot go past that front door, nor can they go past the first floor of public buildings. And regardless, the driver cannot go anywhere where they do not have visual contact with their vehicle. Keep in mind, there still might be other passengers on that vehicle. So they cannot go up to a floor and assist somebody from that place. We do have some advanced technologies. I know I'm starting to run short on time, so I'm going to go through this quickly. You can use paratransit or Ventra on paratransit. Typically, people either had to have their money with them or have a paratransit ticket that you bought by mail or through any of our transit centers. We advise using Ventra. Now, you don't use it like you do on a bus where you tap your card. You actually, when you make your reservation, you let the operator know that you want to use your Ventra card. So you will have to register your Ventra card first. so they can use that, but then they will charge your account for that trip. And then you do not need to have cash with you. We have a thing called Trip Check. This is if you have a smartphone, you can go to our website and find out exactly when your trip is coming. You don't have to call and wait on hold. We are making upgrades to that software so that you will be able to start utilizing that app to also make reservations and cancel reservations. And there's going to be many more improvements to come down the line. So as I mentioned, the Ventron Paratransit, it's optional. You don't have to use it, but if you have the card, you can. You have to link your card first. There's the number on here to do that. And then when you make your trip, you must mention, I want to use my Venture card or my Venture account for that trip. Trip